Welcome to More Than a Therapy Couch, the podcast where we go beyond the walls of traditional therapy sessions. I'm your host, Tiana. In a world that's constantly changing, so are the ways we navigate our mental and emotional health. We're here to embrace the notion that healing and growth extend far beyond the walls of a therapy room. Throughout this podcast, we'll be joined by a diverse array of experts and everyday individuals with compelling stories to bring awareness to whatever you may be facing. Today, we're following up on a topic that resonates with so many of you, the new year, new me mindset, and creating realistic, sustainable routines. If you tuned in to our last episode, we talked about setting intentions, building routines, and finding balance. But now we're here about 2 weeks into the new year, and it's time to ask the big question. How is it really going? Are you still fired up about your goals, or has reality started to set in? Today, we'll check in and talk about how to pivot when things don't go as planned. So grab your favorite journal and your emotional support water bottle as we embark on a journey that goes more than a therapy couch. As a reminder, the topics discussed are for educational purposes only and are not meant to be taken as clinical advice. If you are concerned about you or a loved one's mental health, consult a mental health professional or call SAMHSA's 24-hour hotline at 1-800-662-HELP. So today, to help us unpack all of this, we're joined by Tara, a licensed therapist who you might have remembered from our episode on understanding narcissism. Tara, welcome back.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
So we're so excited to have you here so we can dive deeper into this topic and help listeners stay on track with their goals. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this quick break.
This episode is brought to you by Confections of a Rockstar Bake Shop and Catering. Are you looking for a sweet treat or custom cake and desserts for your next event? Stop into their Asbury Park location where everything is made from scratch using high-quality ingredients. Custom orders can be placed online at www.confectionsofarockstar.com or by calling 732-455-3510 today.
So Tara, let's start with the elephant in the room. We're 2 weeks into the new year. Are most people still sticking to their resolutions at this point?
I would say probably yes. I mean, 2 weeks in, I think everybody's really excited about the new year starting. We know that it takes about, 25 days to develop a habit. So I would say at this point, people probably are still sticking to it if they haven't made adjustments to those things. My personal belief on resolutions is that they're very hard to keep. It's hard to say one thing in January and expect to have the same goal in December. We try to evolve, right, throughout the years and even just within 1 year. So I think that at 2 weeks in, yeah, I'm sure people are still sticking to their goals or their resolutions.
And what are some common reasons routines or resolutions fall apart so early?
I think a lot of it has to do with them not being realistic. For example, we know that gym memberships quadruple in January, and we know that the gyms make it almost impossible to cancel because most gyms you have to go in, right, or provide like a written letter or something. And they do that on purpose because they know that it is very hard to stick to a new routine. So I would say, like, if we're going with the example of going to the gym to work out more or to lose weight, I find that sometimes with that specific goal, like if the end goal is to lose weight, that's something that's really hard to stick to because you're not going to see that for a while, right? We know that as you work out and you lose fat and you build muscle, weight doesn't really fluctuate. So I think when we have a goal in mind and we don't see progress within the first 2 to 3 weeks, it starts to get harder to keep up with because we want to see the progress being made. And if the progress is a number on a scale and it's not going down as quickly as you want to, it feels discouraging. I think also being realistic about your time, right? I'm the type of person who, yes, I completely struggle to motivate myself to do something like working out. So if I were to set a goal in the new year that I'm going to go to the gym 4 times a week, that's never going to happen, ever. So if it's more like, you know what, I want to spend 60 minutes doing some sort of physical activity a week. That way it's realistic within your schedule. Like if I wanted to take my dog for a walk 30 minutes for 2 times a day, that's realistic. And if I do any more than that, then I'm not only hitting my goal, but I'm going above it. And you can start building on that.
And I think one of the things that you mentioned is that people start to get discouraged after that 2 to 3 week mark. And unfortunately, we live in a society where we are very impatient. We
Mm-hmm.
want things. We want things right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it does take that time to like hold yourself accountable and say, and like remind yourself, like, these are the reasons why I even wanted to do this in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And just being able to kind of push through that. So that being said, if you're about 2 or 3 weeks in, if you recognize maybe I'm not, doing what I said that I wanted to at the beginning of the year, how can listeners tell if their goals need to be tweaked or if they just kind of need to push through?
I would say that it depends on your relationship with the goal, right? If I'm setting myself a goal and I know I'm not hitting it every week, and that's causing a narrative in my head of like, you can't even do this, putting myself down for not achieving the goal, there needs to be a tweak there. Um, a lot of what we do in terms of goals, whether that's an emotional goal or a relationship goal or a physical goal, largely depends on how we motivate ourselves to achieve those, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we know, like, if anybody has ever done sports, you have a coach. Everybody's had an experience with a coach where the coach is just like terrible, right? And they just like put you down. They tell you that you can't do it. You're worthless, yada, yada, yada. That's not motivating. If
Mm-hmm.
anything, it just makes you angry. And yet we tend to internalize this voice if we're not achieving the thing that we want to. And even though most of us or some of us have had an experience where someone's putting us down and it doesn't make us work harder, we tend to actually rebel against
Mm-hmm.
that. Um, that we know that internal voice doesn't work for us,
Mm-hmm.
and yet we continue to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if our relationship with the goal is changing in terms of it's now becoming a point of almost contention internally, that's never going to work for us. In terms of pushing through, I think sometimes it's, first of all, it's okay to not hit a goal every single week or every single day. It's just not realistic. So I think in terms of pushing through is this realistic? Can I actually attain this goal? And can I fit it into my schedule? If you can answer yes to all those questions, then maybe it's a little bit more of a motivating issue. How do we motivate ourselves? How do we get ourselves to do that? I find that a lot of times, specifically with something like working out, we're like, oh, if I don't do this today, then I'm going to feel like crap tomorrow, or I'm going to feel lazy, or some other sort of self-criticism. When the reality of it is like, what makes working out exciting is how you feel after you're done, right? You
Mm-hmm.
feel proud, you feel accomplished, you might have more energy, you feel strong. That's where we should try to get to. That's the motivating factor, right? Like I said, I hate working out. I don't believe anybody actually likes it. I don't like it before, I don't like it during, I do enjoy it after. But I think that if we say, if I don't do this, then I'm lazy, is a lot different than if I can push myself to do this, I know I'll feel accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like such a small little tweak, but we know that a lot of narratives in our head, if we tweak them a little bit, they have all these trickle down effects.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're kind of looking for, right? Like the goals are great, but how do you motivate yourself to do them? How do you talk to yourself when you don't? And that's what will change or alter the relationship with them, and whether that's motivating or demotivating.
Mm-hmm. And it like brings up like discipline. Like you have to be very disciplined to follow through with that goal. So like reminding yourself, I love what you said in terms of the self-talk rather than saying, "Oh, I'm worthless because I didn't go to the gym today." Oh, I really don't want to go to the gym today, but I know I'm going to feel so much better when I finish that workout or when I finish, my walk or whatever
Mm-hmm.
workout
Mm-hmm.
you're doing for the day.
Right. Like focusing on the feeling of what it feels like to achieve the goal rather than what you tell yourself if you don't.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And another thing that you mentioned too, like I think bringing up like discipline, like you can still do something and not want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of just like I don't want to go home and meal prep and cook dinner, but I
Absolutely
want to go
not.
on that vacation that I want to save for. So
Sure.
talking to yourself like that and reminding yourself of those things. And it's not the end of the world if you do treat yourself and you go out to eat one day, or you miss a workout at the gym. So we're going to be right back after our sponsor. We're going to take a little break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about accountability and motivation. Today's episode is brought to you by Tree of Life Counseling Center, where people come to heal, deal, and learn to thrive. They currently have immediate availability for talk therapy and medication management with a team of over 50 licensed clinicians. Are you feeling alone? We all can use someone to talk to. Call 732-393-8391 or visit us at www.treeoflifecc.org to start your journey of self-discovery and healing today. All right, and we're back. So, Tara, how can listeners hold themselves accountable in a way that feels supportive rather than critical? So I know we touched on this a bit, but if you could elaborate a bit more.
I think that what's always been helpful for me is I try to tell someone else what my goal is. And obviously there's certain goals that I would keep private to myself, right? But the things that are maybe a little bit more physical, like whether that's going to the gym or taking my dog for a walk or keeping, I don't know, doing my dishes every night, like stuff like that. I try to tell somebody who I can trust. Like I remember a couple of years ago, I really wanted to get into working out again, right? And my sister works out constantly. She does the hot yoga every single day. She does like strength based. She'll like go for a 2-mile run and then she's going to hot yoga and like, wow, we are
Good for you.
Yeah.
Not me.
Correct.
Good for you.
I was like, all right, stop showing off. So I enlisted her in being my personal accountability coach as a joke, obviously. And so we lived together at the time. And so every day she would be like, let's say we were working out at noon. At like 8 a.m., she would text me and be like, hey, we're going to work out at noon. And then it would get to 11. Hey, we're working out in an hour. Then 11:50. Did you change yet? Because we're going downstairs. We're going to go work out. And she would drive me insane. She would drive me literally insane. But I know that my sister is somebody who I can trust and is very supportive of me. And even though I might kind of want to like pull her hair out in the moment, like I know that she's doing it because I told her that I wanted her to. And then we'd wind up working out together. Then she'd be like, see, wasn't that great? And I'm like, yeah, now that it's over, it's great. But I think sometimes sharing it with somebody who you trust and who you share a relationship where when they do try to hold you accountable, that you're not going to get defensive. I think that's a big thing too. When sharing things with people is you want to share it with somebody who is kind of your mirror in a way. Like my sister and I don't keep anything from each other pretty much. And I can't even because the second something's going on, she knows. So I think having somebody like that in your life can be really beneficial just because they can help hold you accountable, even if you get super annoyed with them. I think another way is writing them down, putting them somewhere where they're accessible. Like maybe it's to journal every day, right? Like maybe that's your goal. You find that journaling is a really good release for you, whether that's gratitude journaling or just kind of like venting through the pages or doodling, whatever it is. Having your journal, for example, like on your bedside table, and it's now part of your nightly routine. Something, if you're writing it down or if you want to do something before your bedtime routine or your morning routine, keeping it in eyesight is always going to be more beneficial than like if it was journaling, putting it in your nightstand, because you're never going to remember that. You have a habit already developed of not including journaling. So to reincorporate it, you have to be really intentional about it. And so I think just having something accessible to you, like in your eyesight, makes it a lot easier to remind yourself. Setting alarms on your phone. I know that Apple recently came out with like a journal app, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I highly recommend it. It actually, like, because we know like Apple is just tracking us everywhere we go. It'll actually, when you go into the journal app, it'll tell you the places you've been and you can click on them or pictures you've taken and you can journal about those specific things. It's really cool.
Love that.
Yeah. So I think even something like that, I mean, we are living in an age where technology is at our fingertips at any time. Anything you can think of that helps you is going to be an app, right? I recently learned about this app. I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically like, I don't know if anybody remembers the Tamagotchis back in the day. I'm
Are you
kind of
talking
aging
about
myself.
Finch?
Yes.
I love Finch.
Yes, that's the one I'm thinking about, where like you essentially have this little creature that you take care of and you put in your own goals. It's like the best thing ever. It's so cute. I feel like it does help to hold you accountable when you actually see that physical progress again.
My little guy. Then you can like put all your little things and pick
Mhm.
out what you want.
Mhm.
I love, and then you can hold each other accountable. You can have friends. Your little circle.
Oh, I love that.
We got my producer B. He's on there with his man Taco. But yes, I love Finch, and there definitely are a lot of apps out there. Some of them cost money, some of them are free.
Mhm.
Finch, there is a free version and there is a premium version. We should be sponsored by Finch. What the heck? We need to reach out to them immediately.
Yes.
But yeah, doing certain things to hold like yourself accountable. So I actually spoke to someone yesterday and I mentioned to her like, I've been having trouble with focusing and things along the lines of that. And she said, well, do you work out? I was for a bit and then I kind of stopped. She's
Mhm.
like, that will help you tremendously. Your focus and all of these things will help you. She goes, if you're doom scrolling and you're already scrolling, why can't you walk on a treadmill and also scroll at the same time? At least you're doing something and moving your body.
Mhm.
And I was like, that's a really good point, calling me out.
Yes. I think pairing like an undesirable activity with a desirable one is helpful too. For example, last night, as I mentioned before we started recording, I am rewatching Game of Thrones for, I'm not going to disclose how many times. And I knew I had so much stuff to clean in my kitchen. I knew it, but all I wanted to do was get home and finish the episode that I started the night before. So what I said to myself was, okay, I'm going to make myself dinner. I'm going to sit down on the couch and watch Game of Thrones. Once I'm done with my dinner, I have to get up and clean the things in my kitchen, and then I can resume the episode. So I think almost if-then statements can be really helpful with that too. And again, it's going to be hard to hold yourself accountable sometimes, but I think identifying with that feeling that you feel after it's done is really, really beneficial.
Absolutely. And what strategies can people use to stay motivated when their initial excitement starts to wear off?
I think it's hard to answer in like a broad way because as we know, like even with therapy and different therapy modalities and therapists, like everybody's needs are very individual. I think what could be beneficial is like I know this might come as a surprise to most people, but of course I always encourage therapy. I think that as a therapist and someone who goes to therapy, I appreciate the weekly check-in of like, my therapist is always going to be like, remember that thing you said last week? How you doing with that? And then I either have to disclose that, no, I did not do that at all. Then we talk about why, or I say like, yeah, I did it. And then we kind of process into like, how was that for you? Was it easy? Was it hard? What can we tweak things? I think that in terms of strategies, if you don't have access to therapy or it's just not something that is for you, I think that kind of what I mentioned before, like the alarms, writing things down, pairing a desirable activity with an undesirable one. Sometimes reward systems work really well. Like previously, one of my clients, I don't exactly remember the specific situation, but I just remember them having like a favorite restaurant, right? And they always got the same thing from this restaurant. It like held a lot of memories for them. And so we kind of talked about like, okay, well, if our goal is to, I don't know, keep the living room clean, if we can do that for 14 days straight, go out to the restaurant. Like that's almost like your treat for doing that. And I think it does help to develop a better relationship with the undesirable task as well, because it feels good to get something done, and then it also feels good to reward yourself, which I don't think is often encouraged as adults. Um, I certainly love to reward myself, quite honestly, but I think that it's not often encouraged. It kind of feels like weird, like I'm not a little kid, I don't need to be rewarded, but like at the end of the day, doing something you like to do or that you don't often get to do is always going to feel good. So I think definitely kind of making those if then statements, writing things down, pairing those two activities together, a reward system.
Absolutely. Holding yourself accountable is very hard because at the end of the day, the only person that knows really like if you didn't do something or not is you because you're the one that's setting that goal for you. So bringing it back to just even like therapy, I know therapy may not be for everyone, but one of the things that I really like about therapy is when you meet with your therapist, you, before even like deep diving, being like, this is my history and this is everything about my life. So you're caught up to speed as to why I am the way that I am, is setting goals. Like, what do you want to work on? Where do you want to be in a month from now? Grace said it on the last episode. She was like, you setting goals for yourself, you setting like a new routine for yourself is primarily you just wanting to ask yourself, where do you want to be at the end of 2025?
Mm-hmm.
And what do you need to do in order to get there?
Mm-hmm.
That being said, setting goals in therapy can be really beneficial because then you have that therapist to be like, hey, how is this going? You said you wanted to work on this.
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't been, they can then help you with tools, techniques to get you there. You don't
Yep.
need to go through things alone. And if you don't have the resources or you can access therapy, there's podcasts. You're on your phone all the time anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Do self-help podcasts, do self-help books. There's a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of things that you can do to help yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to be willing and wanting to search for those things.
Right.
So that being said, are there specific signs that someone might need external accountability, like a friend, a mentor, or a therapist when they are going through these things?
I think that it really depends on the goal itself, right?
Mhm.
Like if you are somebody who has to take medication every day, right? And you're finding it incredibly difficult to hold yourself accountable to that, like you forget or you set the alarm, you turn the alarm off, you never wind up taking the medication. Obviously, if you're prescribed a medication every day, that's pretty important that you take it every day. So I think that it depends on how the goal is affecting us, right? So if we're not taking our medication every day, then we're going to need an external something to remind us just so we can keep ourselves safe.
Mhm.
When it comes to goals like working out or keeping your apartment clean or your house clean, whatever, or engaging in a new hobby, it kind of goes back to that relationship with the goal, right? I think that if we are really, really struggling to achieve a goal, it's important to take a step back and be like, is this actually something that's important to me? Is this something that I can actually feasibly commit to?
Mhm.
Is this something that's sustainable? I think that's a big one. I see a lot of people in the new year want to go to the gym, want to do these diets. And the reality of it is, if it's not a sustainable change, it's not going to last. It's just impossible to maintain. And so I think in terms of like an external accountability factor, I think that if you really want to achieve this goal, like you know that if you can achieve this goal consistently, that you are going to evolve into someone you want to be, or you are going to solve a problem that you've been struggling with and you can't seem to get yourself there. I think that having an external accountability factor is really beneficial. And it's not saying that you can't do it on your own, but it's kind of like if you break your leg, you're going to use crutches.
Mhm. So one of the things that you mentioned is like making sure that your goals or your routines that you're setting for yourself are sustainable.
Mm.
So let's say someone realizes that the routine that they set isn't working. How can they try to pivot without feeling guilty about not being able to reach that routine or goal?
I don't know if guilt is avoidable.
Mhm.
I think that it's incredibly normal to feel guilt when you've set this goal for yourself and you're realizing, like, I don't know if this is really going to work out for me. I think there's always going to be a guilt there. It's just a matter of like, what is our capability in regulating that feeling and not drawing a conclusion from it, right? So I can feel guilty about not being able to meet a goal that I've set for myself sustainably without saying then, I feel guilty about this because I'm X, Y, and Z. I'm lazy. I can't do these things. I can't do anything on my own. Like that, there's like a difference between guilt and shame, right? Like
Mhm.
having guilt over something is, I can't complete this task because it's not sustainable in my life. Having shame about it is, I never complete any of these tasks because I'm lazy.
Mhm.
So I think that's a big piece of it, with like understanding that guilt is going to be a normal feeling. And that doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong or anything that you set for yourself is ridiculous. Like, I think that it's our body's way or our brain's way of telling us, like, this kind of sucks right now, which is okay. Another way to kind of make sure that something that you're setting for yourself is attainable is what we would call SMART goals in therapy. So SMART is an acronym. It stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and set to a time, essentially. So I think that if you can set a goal that meets all of that criteria, then you're probably going to be able to hold yourself true to it. I think that if you are looking at your goal and like I mentioned earlier, like you're a person that doesn't go to the gym often, and then all of a sudden you're like, I'm going to go to the gym every day. It's just not going to happen. Recognizing a moment to pivot is when we're consistently unable to achieve this goal that we've set for ourselves despite us really trying.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the time where we would kind of look at, okay, is the time managing accessible to me? Like, can I get this done realistically? Is it something that I actually care about? Is it something that I can achieve? I set a goal like in 60 days. Is that realistic? Is it something that is super specific where it's like, okay, I want to lose 20 pounds. Okay, well, that's not super specific, right? Because it's kind of like you can do that in a matter of healthy and unhealthy ways. So I think something that aligns with your values that matches the goal is really important as well.
And one of the things that you mentioned was you feeling guilty is kind of like a choice, and are you feeling shameful about you maybe not being able to fulfill that goal that you wanted to do, can change your whole perspective on
Mhm.
even wanting to achieve this goal, or
Mhm.
even wanting to continue with this routine. So how can our listeners approach a setback with compassion rather than self-criticism?
One of the strategies that I always use for my clients when they really struggle with this self-critic voice is if a friend came to you and said this, how would you treat them?
Mm-hmm.
What if somebody else said the things to you that you're saying right now? What would that relationship actually look like? And with the self-critic voice, I think it's always important to ask yourself, like, is this my actual voice or is this somebody else's voice that I'm internalizing, right? It's easy to be self-critical. I
Mm-hmm.
think we're all very used to doing that to ourselves. It feels like the right thing to do in
Mm-hmm.
some weird way. There's a researcher, her name is Kristen Neff, and she's truly amazing. And she studies self compassion and the self critic voice. And the way that she kind of frames being self critical is when you take the stance of being a self critic, it's a pretty easy stance to take because that's not the version of you that's messed up. Right. I think it's also really easy to be critical when you're now looking at all of the information versus what you've learned throughout the process, right? So if my goal is to keep my living room clean for 7 days, right? And then at the end of the 7 days I didn't do it. Okay, well, maybe I was sick a couple of days. So it's pretty easy to then turn around and say like you're lazy. You couldn't even do this for 7 days. Like what's wrong with you? When the reality of it is like there were other factors going on there. So I think that being able to kind of, it's going to sound a little weird, but like distance yourself from your own actual experience to be able to take an objective view can be really beneficial. I understand that that's rather abstract, but I do think that you have to look at the whole picture, right? When we're looking at the trees and not seeing the forest, it's pretty easy to be critical. I highly suggest looking up Kristen Neff. She has
Mm-hmm.
amazing videos about self-compassion, the self-critical voice, how to work your way out of that. And it's so beneficial to listen. She's done like a million TED Talks too.
I'm definitely gonna have to check her out.
She's great.
One of the things that I actually was talking about with a friend recently was the idea of radical acceptance. So, what are the facts? What's actually happening?
Mm-hmm.
And being honest with yourself. So, I think something happened last week where it was like one thing after another that kind of happened to me, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like I can't catch a break."
Mm-hmm.
And I was really frustrated with myself,
Mm-hmm.
and my comfort food lately has been Chipotle.
Mm.
So my friend said to me like, "I think you deserve to treat yourself to Chipotle." And I'm like, "Thank you for telling me that. Now I feel better and not guilty
Mm-hmm.
for going to do that."
Yes.
But like just looking at what is true, I would say, and what is just you like overthinking.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
we're all going to be self-critical in some
Yes.
way. I think that just kind of goes back to like how we were all raised in that
Sure.
inner voice.
Mm-hmm.
But it's about like building those like neural pathways and making positive others.
Neuroplasticity.
Yes.
Yeah, and just in case anybody doesn't really know what radical acceptance is, it's essentially like looking at your situation, and you don't have to like it, but you
Mhm.
do have to say like this is what's happening, right?
Mhm.
Because if we don't practice radical acceptance in our everyday lives, it's essentially an avoidance tactic. I
Mhm.
see it a lot with my clients who are struggling with some sort of tension or stressor in their life, and they're like, "Well, it would be fine if I had more money, or it would be fine if this person would act normal, or that it would be fine if I could get this promotion." And it's like, well, you're creating a healing fantasy, right? Like you're
Mhm.
creating a scenario in which the only way this is going to be solved is if you do this, if you get this external thing.
I'll be happy when. I'll
Correct.
be happy if. If I
Right.
just get this, I'll be happy. For me, like at one point I was like, okay, I'll feel a lot better if I get an apartment and get a
Mm-hmm.
car. And then I got
Mm-hmm.
those things and I was like, well, I still don't feel fulfilled or I
Mm-hmm.
still feel like I'm not doing enough.
Mm-hmm.
And those things can be really hard to kind of sit back and just like reflect on, okay, well, these are the things that you want and where you want to go. And everyone's always either looking in the past, looking in the future, but
Mm-hmm.
you don't ever like sit and reflect on, oh my gosh, this is how far I've actually came, or this is all of the things that I actually have in my
Uh,
life right now that I'm
yeah.
thankful for. And sometimes if it's as little as like having a roof over your head and like a warm
Mm-hmm.
meal, then guess what? That's a lot more than a lot of other people have in this world.
Absolutely. I think we also have a tendency to judge ourselves based off of how far away we are from the finish line versus how far away we are from where we started.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if we can reframe that or shift our focus to like, okay, well, I started here and I've been able to do all of this. Maybe I haven't achieved that long-term goal yet that I set for myself, but to disregard everything that I've done up to this point it's a minimization factor,
Mm-hmm.
right? A lot of times when people report feeling depressed, and they're coming to therapy for the first time, you'll hear like, well, I'm depressed because this happened. Depressed because that happened. And while I think, of course, there's going to be triggers and stressors for feelings of depression or feelings of anxiety, I think the reality of it is, regardless of what goes on in our external lives, happiness has to come from within.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we don't let it, if we don't plant the seed ourselves and water it, anytime anything, whether it's a person, a job, a car, an apartment, doesn't go the way we want it to, we are getting derailed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, in the words of Katy Perry, feeling like a plastic bag floating in the wind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we want to feel grounded, and we find safety in consistency.
Mm-hmm.
So when we allow consistency to come in by talking to ourselves in a way that makes us feel comforted, or um, realizing that we can be immovable in a good way, I think that we find safety in that and we tend to cling to it.
I love that. But we are going to take one more sponsored break and we will be right back. Feeling stuck mentally and physically? It may be time to supplement your self-care practices with some holistic healing options. Mind the Body Holistic Wellness in Freehold, New Jersey proudly offers a variety of healing modalities, including Reiki, massage therapy, reflexology, and Himalayan hot stone massages. For more information or to book an appointment, visit www.mindthebodyhw.com. Now back to our show. Back. So we're just getting to the end of today's episode. So, Tara, before we wrap up, what is one piece of advice that you'd give the listeners struggling to keep the routine?
I would say take a break. Take a break. Take a couple days off and see where your motivation lies after that. Because we all know that if you're swimming upstream to begin with, um, if you want to up the current, you just keep doing the same thing over and over again, right? And it just gets harder and harder and harder and harder. So I would say take a break, like give yourself the space you need to realistically look at this goal you've set for yourself and ask, like, is this something I actually care about? Is this something I actually want? I think just going again with the losing weight goal or going to the gym is a lot of times when I start like asking people questions about that, like what's motivating that, it's a lot about like, well, I want people to see me like. And when you are trying to push yourself to achieve something for the validation of others, it's going to get hard to motivate, because if you go to the gym for a month and nobody says anything to you, what is the point? Why are you keep going? So I think maybe we don't have to necessarily change the goal, but maybe we have to change either what our reasoning is or how we word it in our heads.
Mhm.
Right. Like I always suggest to my clients and even myself that if I want to get back into something like working out, time is better than days, right? So instead of saying like 5 days, say 90 minutes. And also when if we're going to the gym and that's our goal, like making it that I want to achieve this amount of weight loss isn't sustainable. So how about, I went to the gym for the first time and I was able to do, everyone's going to know I don't work out after I say this. I was able to do, I don't know, 20 leg presses. And my
Mhm.
goal for the end of this month is to get to 30.
Mhm.
That is measurable. It's easy to keep up with. You're going to see the progress quickly. And it's going to stay motivating. When, and I know I keep talking about the working out, I just think that's the easiest way to explain it. When you go to the gym or you're really working on like reps or increasing weight, you're going to see that within 5 days.
Mhm.
And I think when you do that, you get to build upon it, which makes you even feel more productive and it makes you feel strong.
Mhm.
Like, I think if we all set a resolution or a goal into the new year that we wanted to work out more, if the end goal was to feel strong, I think a lot more people would stick to it rather than saying, I want the scale to say X.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I love that because you will start feeling the results a lot sooner. You
Absolutely.
may go to the gym and do 20 leg press on 20 weight, and then by the end of the week you're able to do 30, and then the next week you're like, all right, well, I'm going to up that weight.
Yep.
Or no, try to do more. Or if you're doing like the Stairmaster, I'm going to do 10 minutes on the Stairmaster on this incline. Next week I'm going to try to do maybe 15 minutes
Mm-hmm.
and then increasing that, and then you'll realize, oh, over time this is getting easier,
Yeah. Yeah.
or I'm not dreading going to the gym, or I did the same workout that I did last week and I don't even feel really sore this week. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I can go longer.
I think also like kind of checking yourself in terms of the rigidity you're
Mhm.
setting for your goals. Like, I know a couple of years ago, I had a client who set a goal that she wanted to read more books.
Mhm.
Awesome. Then it got to the point where I was like, okay, well, let's set a number of books that we want to read for the year. And, in the first month, it was 12 books for the year. Great. One book a month. That's awesome. Then all of a sudden, by like month 6, we were at 52 books. And I'm like, okay. And then by the end of the year, it got to the point where like, well, I want to read 100 books. So I'm just reading books that I don't even really like. And it's like, well, that's not the point, right? So I think,
You're just doing to do it at this point, to be like,
right,
oh, I read 100 books to get that validation from other people. Oh my
right.
gosh, you read 100 books in a year? That's crazy.
Yes. Yes. Can you tell me what any of them are about? No, because you don't remember any of them. So I think like checking yourself on the rigidity of it, or like another example of that is somebody, it had to do with reading again. Like they wanted to read 2 chapters of a book each night. Okay, that sounds great. It's a great wind down routine. We know this. And then as the weeks had gone on, the client was reporting like that they're not sleeping well, and they feel really tired, and they're starting to feel depressed, and like, well, what was happening was they were staying up really late to finish the 2 chapters. And it's like, that's becoming harmful now.
Mhm.
So I think like checking your rigidity in how you set goals is really important too. We know that like a great marker of mental health is the ability to be flexible.
Mhm.
So I think while it can be helpful to have really specific and rigid goals to help yourself hold yourself accountable, I think that if it's becoming detrimental, it's not worth it anymore.
And that's why it's so important to check in with yourself. So with like specifically that client, okay, they were maybe having insomnia at that point, not really sleeping.
Mm,
Let's reevaluate. maybe 2 chapters is a little too much. Maybe you read 2 chapters a week and spread it out, or maybe break it down to 1 chapter, maybe a certain amount of pages, whatever the case may be, but just checking in with yourself. And there's nothing wrong with changing your goals. It's not a setback. It is more so of a redirection.
Yep.
And sometimes you may have to take 3 steps back in order to go 5 steps forward.
Exactly. My last piece of advice is please, please, please acknowledge your accomplishments. I find that a lot of my conversations with my clients, and even, internally, revolve around like, okay, well, I set this goal and I did it, but like normal people do that, whatever normal people are. Never met one. Clients who really struggle with depression and struggle with ADLs, which is activities of daily life. Maybe they really struggle to shower regularly. That's a very common symptom of severe depression. And now they've set the goal that they want to shower at least 3 times a week. So they start achieving that pretty consistently. And then I'll reflect to them like, wow, like this is amazing. You've been able to do this for a month straight. And they're like, yeah, but this is what normal people do. And it's like, well, okay, but this isn't something you were able to do previously. So why does that not matter? And then also the example I always give is if somebody wants to quit smoking cigarettes, which I feel like I feel like that's not like a problem you often hear anymore in therapy. But let's say somebody wants to quit smoking cigarettes and they smoke 12 cigarettes a day. And then for a week, they only smoke 11. Is that not progress?
Well, I'm still smoking cigarettes.
Right.
Okay.
But you're smoking 1 less. So you're holding yourself accountable in a way. I mean, definitely in black and white terms, you are limiting your use. You're not going with your typical routine. So why does that not deserve to be celebrated too?
I absolutely love that we're ending on that note, just making sure that you are celebrating your accomplishments, reflecting and checking in with yourself, and making sure that you're setting realistic routines, realistic goals. Talked a little bit on the last podcast that we don't really like the word resolution. It's very rigid and it's very tense. So just being mindful of how you're talking to yourself and how you are just going about the goals and the routines that you are setting. So just reflecting back on the key takeaways, making sure that we're holding ourselves accountable, giving ourselves self-compassion, and the importance of flexibility. There's nothing wrong with going back and changing things. You can always start over. You can always start again. And guess what? You don't always have to do it at the beginning of the year, the beginning of a month, beginning of a week. You can start on a random Tuesday if you want.
Yep. And you can set a new goal every hour. If I have a bad morning, right? It doesn't have to be a bad day. If I get to work at, I don't know, 12 or whatever time I come in, I can then choose to have a better day going forward.
Absolutely. If you had a crappy morning, okay, well, what am I going to do to try to make my day better? You might have got stuck in traffic. You might have maybe woke up late. Okay, it is what it is. What can you do about it now to try to turn the day around?
Exactly. And what value does it add to your life to stick in that feeling?
Absolutely. What is that saying? It's a bad day, not a bad life.
Yes. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. We will see you guys on our next episode. We hope everyone has enjoyed their holiday and has been enjoying the new year. And we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.